Here's a question from Gino. Just reading the Sermon on the Mount again, when Jesus lays out the Lord's Prayer and what he says around it reads to me like we should only pray that way and not ask for any other specific items. Is that accurate, or am I missing something?
I don't think that's accurate, to put it simply. When we look in the epistles, for example, or even in the book of Acts, we see prayers recorded in epistles, but in Acts, was it 19 or maybe 20, where Paul is saying goodbye to the Ephesian elders, they kneel down and pray. And I think we have a record of Paul's prayer there. And it doesn't necessarily conform to what we find in the Sermon on the Mount, the so-called Lord's Prayer, probably more properly called the Disciples' Prayer, because the Lord's Prayer is in John 17, when he prays to the Father for the disciples. The circumstance that we see there in the different areas of the synoptics where the Lord's Prayer is given is when the disciples are not sure how to pray. They are aware that Jesus prays. There are prayers that are part of the, in a certain sense, the cult of worship, things that they repeat and the Pharisees say and all this other stuff. Those are rote prayers. I'm not dissing them. I'm just saying they could repeat things, but they don't know how to be personal with God. Like the way they see Jesus is personal. They're aware of Jesus praying, and so they come to Jesus and say, Lord, teach us to pray. Help us to know what to do. And he says, pray this way. He doesn't say pray exactly. He doesn't say pray these things and these things only. He says pray this way. And then he gives a kind of an outline of prayer. And the synoptics record different versions of it. You know, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. Matthew, Mark, Luke are the synoptics, not John. And they have a lot of overlapping material. And so there are at least two places where the Lord's Prayer is given, and they're a little bit, just a skosh different. But you get the sense of it. It's a pattern. And you start with the Father. You pray to the Father. That's clearly Jesus' exhortation. And then you move down from there to these different things. And there's a doxology in one version that's probably added by somebody else. That is the kingdom of the glory of the power forever. That's probably a scribal gloss, because it's not the same in every manuscript. But in any event, you get the essence of it. The irony to me is that Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, I think, tells the disciples not to pray in what he calls meaningless repetition, as if by saying it more times you're going to get more favor. That's the way the pagans pray. And what people have done, some people have done with the so-called Lord's Prayer, is they've done just that. Let's just pray this prayer a whole bunch of times over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, because if we say it 10, 15, 20 times, we get more favor from God in doing it. So it's a complete distortion. In any event, I don't think that what Jesus was doing was saying, here are the limits of prayer. I think he's giving us a pattern, especially for people who are untutored in prayer like the disciples, that you pray to the Father, and here's a pattern. They entail a number of different things. There's some very good books that take the Lord's Prayer. Martin Luther did it. Who's the guy who in New York?
Keller.
Yeah,
Tim Keller.
Sorry. Tim Keller did a good book. Kevin DeYoung did an excellent work on prayer, focusing on the Lord's Prayer too. They tend to be smaller works because it's a short prayer, and they help you to understand how you can employ that in your own life. But it's not meant to limit you, nor did the disciples take it as a limitation, as evidenced by their own prayers.
Right. All we have to do is look at the other prayers in the New Testament. Just look at all the prayers, and you'll see they're not exactly word for word those exact things. They're just categories of things that we should be praying for and keeping in mind.